Hey, what is up, guys? Justin Ochoa here, your host of Gym Sessions, and today we have a great episode in store. If you are watching on YouTube or Spotify, you see the whiteboard behind me is decked out with tons of information that we're going to unpack today. If you're only streaming the audio, that's totally okay. Continue to do so. You'll get a lot out of this no matter what. But if you do have the capability to go back and watch this with the visual component, I think that you'll love it because we're going to be pointing to the whiteboard. We're going to be connecting dots. We're going to really be following the entire basketball off-season programming today, and we're going to break it all down. Now, this is something I'm obviously super passionate about because I think we have one of the best basketball off-season programs in the world. We're getting world-class results. Our athletes are killing it. Our athletes are feeling the results, and right now in the season, you're starting to see all that work they put in kind of come out on the court, and it's amazing to see. And I'm really proud of the program that we have. So I'm going to break down exactly what we do in the off season, and we will just take a deep dive on it. And I think it'll be refreshing to talk coaching, talk programming, talk all the X's and O's that we normally don't get to do on this show or really on social media anymore, because it's all about entertainment now, and people don't want to hear the X's and O's. But if you tuned in, I appreciate that, because it really is an important topic that all coaches need to continue to network over and refine. So before we get into today's show, I do want to say thank you to our partners over at Hoist. Hoist is an IV level hydration drink that's phenomenal. I've been drinking this stuff for years. I love the results. I love all the flavors. They have 6 amazing flavors. They have way more electrolytes than most sports drinks on the market, way less sugar, no fillers, clean ingredients. It's a great product, and I'm so happy that they are supporting the show. If you want to learn more about Hoist, you can go to drinkhoist.com, shop around, look at the formulas, look all about the company. It's amazing people over there at Hoist. If you do like what you see, feel free to use my code PACE, P-A-C-E, for 10% off. If you'd like to save money, we're going to be friends. All right, so again, that's PACE, 10% off at drinkhoist.com. Now let's jump into this. Let's get into this basketball off-season program. Now, before we do that, I do have to lay some ground rules, right? This is because that's the dangers of the internet. Like, people are going to take this and just think it's one size fits all just because it's laid out, but it's not. You still have to coach. It's just a template. Okay, this is just a system. It's a set of principles that we've used for the last 5-6 years, and I've pulled bits and pieces from different coaches. I've stolen things here, stolen things there, refined things, added my own flair on things. Like, it's really a culmination of 10 years in the industry, figuring it out and trying to figure out what works best for each type of athlete. So get that out of the way. Look, will this work for everyone? No. Will it work for the vast majority of basketball players? Yes. Are there special cases where this might not work? Probably. But for the most part, if you can take this template for what it is, introduce it to your athletes appropriately with the correct exercise variations or dosing, volume, things like that, then there's a really good chance you're going to get some world-class results. And trust me, I've seen 40-inch vert jumpers add 6-7 inches to their vert. I've seen 21-mile-an-hour runners add 1 extra mile an hour, right? So it's not like it just works for developing athletes. This works definitely for developing athletes, but it also works for elite athletes to get the most out of their genetic potential possible. So just wanted to throw that out there, because there's always those people on social media that are going to say, oh, well, you didn't hit this extremely specific niche point that helps me. And it's like, look, man, this is just a template. There's always going to be exceptions, okay? No 2 athletes are the same. You're not going to be able to just squeeze them into this bucket and one size fits it all your way in through the program. But like I said, if you find the right details, variations, and variables to apply to your athletes or your population within the principles of this, you're going to be good. All right. So again, this is basketball off-season programming, strength and conditioning edition. Okay. This has nothing to do with on-court. Okay. So this is not the on-court version. I'm not even going to talk about on-court drills or anything like that. I'm just going to go straight X's and O's of programming. So it's broken down into 3 phases. As you can see, we got phase 1, 2, and 3. Now, in a perfect world, depending on your population, you'll be able to get all 3 phases. So you would have ideal 12 weeks minimum to work with an athlete. If you do, and you have 12 weeks and you knock these out 4 weeks, 4 weeks, 4 weeks, it's going to be a beautiful off season. But we know that's not always the case, right? Because some athletes go to the playoffs, some athletes get surgery in the off season, some athletes have to go to a second season, like we're talking like WNBA or overseas basketball players. There's not always a perfect off season. Now, if you're in college and you're in school at a school that's out of state from where you grew up, you know, you're going to be back and forth. They're going to want you back there in August, and then you might get to come back for a little bit. Like it's not going to be perfect again, but you can fill in the blanks and make it work for you. Now, phase 1 is going to be the first training exposure after the season, meaning it could be right after the season, it could be a month after the season. That's up to the athlete and when they want to start training. But phase 1 is going to be the most important phase, and this is our force maximization phase. Okay, so force maximization, that's just a fancy way to say, like, let's get stronger. Let's try to get our strength and hypertrophy back. Let's maximize our force output, right? So the key concepts during phase 1 is going to be to restore range of motion, rebuild a foundation, alleviate any pain that may be lingering. So if you had to go through a return to play protocol or rehab or anything like that after the season, make sure you complete that. And then obviously we're going to maximize our force output. So when we look at programming, we can split it up into 2 different categories. We can split it up into strength conditioning, and then we can split it up into speed, agility, and quickness, or SAQ. Okay, so S&C or SAQ. Now, knowing that our key concepts are to build a foundation, restore range of motion, alleviate pain, maximize force output, we're going to take those with us into the weight room and onto the turf or wherever you do your SAQ work. So our strength and conditioning focuses are going to be high force, high focus on eccentric and isometric lifting protocols. Technique and education is going to be key. We're going to have the most ranges of motion that we do throughout the off season is going to be in this phase, because again, we're rebuilding that foundation and we're trying to restore range of motion that was lost during the season, just like we're trying to restore force production that was lost during the season. So, and more time under tension. So that's going to be a snapshot of what the S&C work is going to focus on. Now, in the SAQ world, because we want high force in the weight room, we want to match that in our sprint work and work on acceleration, which is where you're going to get the most force. These are going to be most likely closed chain drills. You're not going to start working in live play or live drills at this moment. Again, just like in S&C, we want technique and education to be at the forefront. So now we're learning drills, we're relearning techniques, we're relearning movement patterns that were kind of butchered during the season. And then ground contact time in this phase is going to be the longest. of any phase, because again, we're working on force and acceleration, which is going to require us to spend more time on the ground, which is okay because it will progress as we go through. So a couple of my favorites here when talking exercise programming is going to be 5 to 15 yard sprints, our pogo skip and plyo foundations, loaded jumps, loaded throws. Lifting wise, I love rear foot or front foot elevated split squat. Either one of those is great because it adds range of motion by elevating either the front or back foot. Loaded push-ups, I love those. Chest supported row, trap bar deadlift, Cossack squats or Cossack squats. Don't even really know how to say it, but I love those. And then anything on a K-box, because again, we want to focus on that eccentric and that isometric contraction. So these are kind of my favorites. And this is the main lifts. Like, this has nothing to do with the accessories or some of the personalized stuff. This is just kind of the generic. These lifts work in this phase because they focus on high force, eccentrics, isometrics. They're great for drilling technique. They have large ranges of motion and they have a lot of ground contact time. That is what we want out of phase one, because that is where we're going to build the foundation for this athlete, right? After a basketball season, range of motion is going to be I don't want to say they're going to lose range of motion, but they just haven't accessed it probably, unless they have a really good strength coach. But in the season, we don't deep squat on the court. We don't, go through a full range of motion like a push-up. Everything is partial because it's so sport specific, because we're playing our sport. That's totally fine. But we want to restore all that during the season, right? Same thing with strength. Like, it's a long season, so fatigue is going to be super high, which means we're going to have a little bit of drawback from that, which means we might lose muscle, we might lose strength, and that's okay. It's to be expected. And now we can train in season and try to mitigate some of these things, but a lot of times the game is going to take a toll on you. So again, phase one, that's what we want. Now, if you are a VBT user or have any kind of technology, I do want to hit on VBT during this phase should be about 0.35 to 0.50. That's going to put us at a good range of strength. That's going to put us at a good range of strain, I should say. So 0.35 is a little, most people would say like 0.2 is where they want their like heavy sets to be. But 0.35 is good for me and it works for us because maybe it's a little bit on the conservative side. But again, what are we working on? Technique and education. So if I can get a perfect rep, all the muscles recruited that we want, fine tune that technique on whatever lift that is at a 0.35, I'll take that any day of the week over a grinder rep at 0.20. That's 30 more pounds, but the technique is even a 8 out of 10, right? If I can get a 10 out of 10, 0.35, I'm happy. That's going to be a really good heavy rep or a series of heavy reps. Now on the high end of that, we got 0.50 meters per second. Now we're kind of working into a little bit more of a hypertrophy range, but that range, it tells me where we can go with the weight. So if you're at 0.5 on a set of trap bar deadlifts and it looks clean and it feels good and we're communicating and we're like, yeah, let's go up. Because if you really put some intent into that, you can maybe be around 0.6, 0.7, which is not the range we want to look at here. So let's up the weight, keep the form locked in, and then we can see how that feels and adjust from there, right? So 0.35 to 0.50 is great range. If you do any loaded sprints, I'm a big fan. Obviously I have the 1080 sprint, so that's the beauty of that is it does all the math and the work for me, which is like what I need. But if you don't have one, you can just load sprints with, I like to do 50% velocity max. So you could even do 50% of time. So let's say it takes you, let's say you're doing 10 yard sprints, and your athlete is at a 1.7. So you want to add enough weight to have them slow down to about half that speed. So if you're at 1.7, you would double that time, and that'd be what? 3.4, or no, 2.4, whatever it is. I don't know. I'm not doing math right now. But you double that, and then you would try to add weight that would slow the athlete down to that time. Or vice versa, if you have miles per hour capabilities. Now it's really bothering me that I can't do 1.7. Hold on. That's ridiculous. I can't do that in my head. 3.4. I was right. All right. We got to backtrack now. Sorry, guys. I lost my train of thought. Not trying to embarrass myself on YouTube, right? So 3.4 seconds. Let's say you add 100 pounds on a sled or some type of weighted pulling device, and then that same 10 yards takes you 3.2 seconds or 3.4 seconds or whatever. That's a good weight. Now that would be considered a 50% velocity, 50% of max velocity. Or if you have the capability to take a split time, convert it to miles per hour, meters per second, whatever you use, and then you add the weight that would lead to a 50% decrement of that miles per hour. So that's a big zone for me. Like that's where you get a lot of force production, because that weight is so heavy. You're gonna have to dig to really get moving. Like especially if you're using a sled or something that has friction, not like a 1080 sprint or anything like that. But if you're using something with friction, you're gonna really have to produce a lot of force to get that moving in the right direction. So before we move on to phase 2, I do want to hit on why I think some of these lifts are perfect. And again, these are not the only lifts. These are just my favorite. And these are just some of my favorites. So if you look at the rear foot or the front foot elevated split squat, this is adding range of motion or allowing athletes to hit their full range of motion. Same thing, loaded push-ups, full range of motion through a horizontal press, and you can even elevate the hands to drop deeper than where the floor would be by elevating the hands and going through that chest supported row. Same thing, you've got free space, right? You're chest supported on that bench. You can row up past that bench without losing structural integrity like you would in a traditional 3-point row. So all of the same with trap bar deadlift, not necessarily for the range of motion, because I do love heavy RDLs as well, but the trap bar deadlift allows you to maximize range of motion within your force production capabilities, right? So we're trying to keep high force. So these exercises, I think, not only are foundational because they progress to other things throughout the series of this program, but they're also good no matter what, no matter when. Like you can always regress down to this because they're such foundational movements that you can really customize it to say, okay, well, if my athlete really liked loaded push-ups, then I can use it in the phase 3, even though it's not the same phase, we can use it in a different way. Like they're competent, they enjoyed them, they got results. Like now we can add a velocity or power component in later phases to get the most out of that enjoyable exercise. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So moving on to phase 2, power production. Key concepts here are obviously power production and transfer of our force into power. We want to maintain our range of motion and our force that we developed in phase 1. And then now we can introduce a little bit of specificity. Specificity, wow, I said it right on the first try. All right, here we go. It's gonna be a good day. Good day. All right, specificity, we got that out of the way. I was nervous about that. Thought I was gonna have to scrap this podcast 20 minutes in. So again, we're gonna break it down from a S&C and SAQ standpoint. From an S&C standpoint, we have high power output, more concentric focused, higher neural demands, and we can make adjustments for range of motion. From an SAQ standpoint, we're going to start to transition into a little bit more of top end speed. We're going to be semi-chaotic with our drills, semi-specific with our drills. In these drills, we will probably have longer distances than we did in phase one. And then we're going to be shorter ground contact time because now we're getting that pop off the ground, right? We're not accelerating anymore. We're going to actually run, or we're going to focus on reducing our ground contact time. Now, a couple of my favorites, again, we're going to hit on some of them just off the top of the head. These were some of my best ones. You got 10 to 25 yard sprint. We got loaded plyos, jumps and throws. So you see the progression, right? It's a longer sprint than phase one, loaded version of phase one plyos. Reaction games are great here. Any safety squat or split squat variations, trap bar jumps, heavy trap bar jumps, dumbbell floor press. Now we're playing with the range of motion a little bit. Landmine rows, lateral lunges, and then key here is any phase one lift with bands or chains for accommodating resistance. And the reason is we built a foundation in phase one. So if we need to revisit any of those lifts, we can, and then we can add a variable of accommodating resistance or bar speed protocols to those to get what we want, which is power production out of phase two. Now, if you do utilize VBT, we're looking at 0.75 to 1.0 meters per second. That's going to put us in a high intent, a moderate weight, moving fast. It's going to produce a lot of power, right? A lot of force and velocity. We're going to get some power from it. From our sprints, we should be looking at improvements in that 0 to 15 yard range because we spent so much time working on force maximization in phase one. We're going to be able to see immediate results in our sprints from 0 to 15 yards because the centric and isometric strength and force production gained in phase one is going to transfer right over nicely into phase two. From our jumps, we should be seeing increases in height, not necessarily quickness or RSI yet because we didn't focus on that yet. But in phase one, we focus so much on force output that jump should start to increase. The jump height should start to increase, I should say. Right? So phase two, power production. Now, something I didn't mention about phase one is that it is the most important phase because it's a foundation and it's the first training stimulus that an athlete will have after their season. So we need to lock that in so that everything we do beyond that is really, really solid, right? We don't want any cracks in our armor, so to speak. So I've had instances where an athlete has a very short off season, call it 4, 5, 6 weeks, and instead of just trying to rush through all three of these phases, I just say, screw it, let's stay in phase one, because I think that you're going to get a lot of stimulus that you would from phase 2 and 3 from your sport, and your sport is approaching rapidly, and to be able to handle that stimulus, we're going to have to focus on phase 1, because if I send you to camp weak, or if I send you to your team weak, and then you start playing, jumping, doing all these high velocity activities, and you don't have the structural robustness to handle all of that load and the rapid increase of that load, it's not going to be good. So that is the purpose of phase 1. Now, again, if we do have an off season, we can go 4 weeks here, 4 weeks here, 4 weeks here. But if we don't, then don't rush through phase 1. That's all I'm trying to say. Don't rush through phase 1, because phase 1 is going to protect your athletes. Okay, phase 2 and 3 are more fun. You're going to squeeze a lot of output out of these athletes in phase 2 and 3. But if you don't handle phase 1, phase 2 and 3 are not going to be as beneficial as they can be. And nor are they going to be as secure and healthy as they can be if they end up going back to the season. So I just want to throw that in there because like all this stuff in phase 2 and 3 is super fun. It's dope. It's my favorite stuff to do. But you have to do this stuff over here if you want to get to that and really like layer it on like it should be, right? So now, sorry, I'm having trouble like trying to figure out where I want to stand now. So now we'll look at phase 3. So phase 3, our goal, everything we want is max velocity. So now we've worked on our force. We've turned it into power. Now we're going to turn it into pure speed. Our key concepts here are max speed, more individualization, more specificity. I'm 2 for 2 on specificity today. Let's go. Intensity and volume adjustments when needed. And then most importantly, we have to be ready to compete. This is the last training stimulus that you'll get with the athlete before they go into the season. So we have to be ready to compete. So some of the things we're going to focus on from a strength conditioning standpoint, our lifts are going to be high power, high velocity. We want shortened ranges of motion. We want to increase data collection if you do collect data, because that's when some of these bar speeds or some of these velocities are going to matter the most, because we want that data to compare. And then we know we're going to have the highest neural demand in this phase. Okay, so because of that, obviously we're going to have to play with the volume and intensity a little bit. On the SAQ standpoint, we got max velocity going crazy, right? Like longer sprints. We want to just be fast, play fast, expose our athletes to those high velocities so that when they get it in the game, it's like cakewalk, right? Live play and drills, going to be great. Again, ground contact time now is our shortest because we're sprinting, we're upright sprinting, we're top end speed. So we're just on the ground for a split second. And then specificity here in the drills is we're going to maximize that. Okay, so more specificity, like meaning we can start to work the sport into training a little bit. So some of my favorites, we got 30-yard sprints, we got overspeed work, we have live drills and play. This is crucial right here. Any phase 1 or 2 lift with a contrast. Okay, so now you can go back to phase 1, and let's say your athlete really liked trap bar deadlift, right? And they got up to like 450 at 0.35 meters per second for 2. All right, that's a heavy deadlift. That's solid, good bar speed, sound mechanics. And let's say we went to a trap bar jump, or we went to some kind of clean variation in phase 2. So they haven't done a heavy trap bar deadlift, so they like that. They want to continue lifting heavy. We can come back here. Phase 1, 2 lift with a contrast. Now we can go back to our heavy trap bar deadlift and add a contrast to it. So we can go back to maybe 400 pounds at 0.35 and then hit a broad jump or a series of broad jumps after, right? So this is how each one plays into each other, because sure, you don't want to do same lifts throughout the whole off season, but you are going to develop some favorites. Like athletes are going to develop favorites and things that just fit their body right, and things that they get really good results from, most importantly, right? So maybe you did a trap bar deadlift in phase 1, and in a phase 2 you went away from it. You can always come back to it in phase 3. There's nothing wrong with that. There's actually nothing wrong with trap bar deadlift in phase 1, trap bar jump in phase 2, back to heavy trap bar deadlift with a contrast in phase 3. There's nothing wrong with that, because the athlete, again, built that foundation in phase 1, which is why it's so important. Or maybe you did RDLs in phase 1 to get the hip hinge, and then you did a trap bar deadlift with some type of bar speed goal in phase 2 to get the power. You can go back to, heavy RDLs in phase 3 with a contrast, like a broad jump or a vertical jump. So get creative there. And same thing, any phase 1 or 2 lift for max velocity. So again, we can play to our concentrics, we can play to our shortened ranges of motion, we can play to our more neural demand. We can take that same trap bar deadlift and say we want to hit max velocity trap bar deadlift with body weight on the bar, concentric only, drop at the top, right? So now we're getting high concentric contraction, high neural demands, low volume, no eccentric loading, max velocity, max intent. So again, these are just some of the variables. I'm kind of going on a rant here, but you get the point, right? We can train partials on purpose, quarter squats, trap bar deadlifts again. We can do floor press. Any type of partial on purpose is going to be great here. Transverse lunges, I love that because you can add a contrast to that with any change of direction work because of the force vectors. And then I really love landmine jerks and press variations. So I love Olympic lifts, program them where I see fit, but I love the landmine and the trap bar jump variations as a substitute. We can get the same outputs. I've collected data on it. I've argued like every person on the internet possible. Like, it's fine. I like both, but I think I like these better. VBT. If you use VBT, if you're looking at averages in phase 3, you're going to be at 1.5. If you're looking at the peaks, it's going to be about 2.5 or more, right? So anytime, because in this phase, you might jump. If you jump, gravity is at play. If gravity is at play, then you want to be checking your peak velocity on your VBT readouts, right? So trap bar jumps, trap bar jerks, landmine jerks. If you want to look at your sprint speed, you should be seeing more miles per hour. So the miles per hour, obviously, velocity goes up. That's what we want. In terms of jumps, we want to look at our RSI as well as our vertical jump. So the vertical jump obviously will go up, but also the RSI, which is the reactive strength index, that is basically how much force you can put out and how fast you can put it out. That's going to be super important because the ground contact time is lower, right? So now, phase 3 is complete. Let's say we did 4 weeks, 4 weeks, 4 weeks. You got a sick 12-week off season in. You got force maximization. You got power production. You went to max velocity. You addressed all your pain. All those aches and pains are gone. You addressed flexibility and mobility issues. Like, you should be, as an athlete, like, feeling really good. And the results that we've seen, like I said, are incredible. But how, as a coach, do you implement all of this, right? Because it's a lot. Like, and it's not, again, there's no perfect world scenario. You're going to have to take this and kind of rip it apart and then put it back together for what fits in your environment. But here's what I do. This is my easy split. And this has worked for years. Monday is a push day. Wednesday is a pull day. Friday is a multi-planar day. Okay? So we got push, pull, rotate, lateral. We call it multi-plane. So that's a good split. It gives us Tuesday, Thursday to either condition. That's something I didn't talk about because I think that deserves its own podcast. Conditioning in phase 1, I love. Got to get, a good aerobic base. I'm a big fan of high intensity continuous training, or HIIT. We'll probably dive deep on conditioning one day, but Tuesday, Thursday, we can work in conditioning if it's not part of the lift, or they can recover, or they can go play or train their sport. So it gives us 3 solid days to work with: a push day, a pull day, and a multi-plane day. They're all full body, so we're not getting crazy sore. And again, they're all progressed through phase 1, 2, and 3, so we're getting exactly what we need from that phase. How a session will look is like this: 10 minutes of tissue prep, 25 minutes of SAQ work, 35 minutes of S&C work, and then about 5 minutes of restoration. So tissue prep, that's going to be your warm-ups, any like rolling or individual PT therapy exercises that they might need, that goes there. So anything that's going to prepare the tissue and the athlete for that session. Then we'll go into 25 minutes of phase specific SAQ work. So whatever phase we're in, again, we're going to take those key points and qualities from that phase and we're going to add that to our day to start our session. So what that might look like, I just call it technique, drill, and test. Okay, so what are we working on today? Let's say it's acceleration. We're going to do drills that increase or enhance acceleration mechanics. Then we're going to drill it in different ways. Then we're going to test it in a form of a loaded sprint or a sprint for time, 0 to 15 meters, yards, whatever you use, right? So technique, drill, test. Then we move on to about 35 minutes of S&C work, which is our lift. And 35 is subjective. If you're crushing it, you can get through it. If you're a talker, it might take you 45, 50. It's fine. It's no rush. But, 75 minutes training session, you can get this done. And what that looks like is we have our A, which is our main lift, which will be something that you saw here. We have our A is our main lower body. B is our main upper body. C is an assistance or auxiliary lift that helps A. D is an assistance lift that helps B. If you have if you have E, it is a phase specific accessory. So something that athlete really needs for that phase. You can throw that in there. And then if you have an F, it's an enjoyable exercise for the athlete. So, for the bros, you might want to add some curls. Some of the women want to work on their glutes more, their abs more. Like you get to know your athlete through the years and you know what their personal preferences are, like aside from getting ready for their sport. And you throw that in there because they enjoy it and it makes them feel good and you want them to have a great experience. So F at the end of the workout, that's where you can put in enjoyable experience and kind of send them home feeling great. And then 5 minutes of restoration work, some type of breathing drill or recovery drill, or even just a great conversation about life that has nothing to do with sports, it does wonders for the athlete, right? And again, we want that athlete to enjoy the process. We want the athlete to really love putting the work in because sports are so difficult and it's harder the higher you get in level, right? So we want the athletes to truly enjoy this process and really not take it for granted and just show up and train hard every day, right? So there you have it. That is phase 1, 2, 3, and the programming layout on how to make this happen. That is the basketball off-season strength and conditioning plan. Pretty much plug and play. You take your athlete, you perform an assessment on them, whatever that means to you is whatever. You then take the data from the assessment, you apply that to this program, the principles of this system, you plug it in as you see fit. I promise you, you're going to get crazy results. It's a cheat code. If you do this, I promise you, you'll be so happy with your results, and your athletes will also be happy with the results, obviously. But again, this is awesome stuff, and I can't stress enough that this has been picked at and played with over the years. I've taken stuff from coaches, put my own spin on it, taking stuff from here, there, books, podcasts, coaching clinics. You just absorb all this stuff. So if anything, I want you guys to take some of this, take what you see usable, and implement it into your program. And let me know what you think. Like if it's just a few things, I really think you'll get a lot out of it. So again, appreciate you guys for bearing with me. I'm not sure if you can hear it on your end, but there is a lot of commotion right outside my studio window. So I've been trying my best not to look out there and trying my best to stay focused on the whiteboard, but we made it through. All right, we made it, and I really appreciate you guys listening. if you could do me a huge favor, give this podcast a star review. Give this podcast feedback on whatever platform, whether it be YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, Amazon Music. We're on all platforms. I would really appreciate it if you leave positive reviews, positive feedback. That really helps the podcast grow, helps other people find our show, and most of all, it helps me continue to, find new ways and stay motivated to get you guys more guests or more content like this, because at the end of the day, I'm doing this for the audience. I really want to provide value for you guys on all these different topics, and the more feedback I get, the more the show grows. It's easier for me to get guests on because they actually want to go to a show where they feel like they're going to be seen and heard, and it's crazy, man. The podcast game is nuts. But again, I appreciate you guys so much. If you could do that, review, rate it, share it with a friend, and I will see you guys next week for another episode of Gym Sessions Podcast. Thank you.